What was a major red flag you noticed that everyone else seemed to think was normal? Started a new job, and the CEO's favorite phrase was, "We're all family here." He said it at every company meeting, every casual chat. Everyone else just ate it up, praising him for fostering such a warm environment. Then he'd demand 12-hour days, guilt-trip people for taking sick leave, and refuse overtime pay because family supports family. I left after 6 months. 2 years later, that family declared bankruptcy due to rapid employee churn. My old colleagues were shocked. I wasn't. Exploitation is not family. My ex used to get insanely jealous, but everyone framed it as how much she cares. She demanded to know my whereabouts every hour, check my phone just to see what silly memes you're looking at, and even once try to follow me to a work event. Her friends would gush, "Wow, she really loves you, huh?" When I finally broke up with her, they all call me cold and heartless. No, I just prefer not being in a personal prison where caring means surveillance. That's a red flag, not romance. I had a friend group with a guy, Mark, who consistently canceled plans at the last minute. Dinner reservations, concert tickets, even a planned road trip. Always a sudden emergency. Everyone else just laughed it off. "Oh, that's just Mark. He's so spontaneous," and always reinvited him. After he flaked on my engagement party an hour before, I stopped inviting him. The others called me harsh. 2 years later, Mark confessed he just didn't want to go out unless he felt like it, using excuses to avoid feeling bad. Not spontaneous, just disrespectful. My childhood friend's mom used to tell us, as kids, about how she sacrificed everything so my friend could have a good life. It wasn't loving. It was a constant, unspoken debt. If my friend wanted to go to a party, it was after all I've done. If they disagreed, "Don't you remember when I worked 3 jobs?" Everyone, even other parents, thought this was normal parenting talk. My friend, now 30, still can't make a decision without calling her mom, terrified of upsetting her. That's not love. That's emotional manipulation. In my first corporate job, everyone stayed until 7 or 8 p.m. every night, despite officially leaving at 5 p.m. Just catching up, they'd say, shows dedication. Managers praised those who regularly stayed late. No overtime pay, just company culture. I tried leaving on time once and got side-eyed. I watched colleagues burn out, get sick, then be replaced. I switched jobs after a year. My current company values efficiency, not presenteeism. It's possible to leave on time and be productive. Who knew? I dated a guy once who'd constantly explain his bad behavior with, "Well, I'm a Gemini." He'd be flaky, moody, or contradict himself, then shrug and say, "It's my star sign, what can I do?" His friends thought it was hilarious. Even his family would chime in with, "Oh, he's such a typical Gemini." I just saw it as a transparent excuse for not taking responsibility. You're a grown man, not a celestial alignment. Breaking up with him was surprisingly easy. He just blamed it on our incompatible charts. Whatever, dude. My college roommate had a habit of making cutting remarks, then immediately following them with, "Just kidding." He'd criticize my clothes, my grades, my choices, always with that smirk. Everyone in our friend group laughed along, saying I was too sensitive if I got upset. It's just his sense of humor. I eventually realized just kidding isn't a magical shield against being a jerk. It's a cowardly way to insult someone and then avoid confrontation. I distanced myself. Funny how I stopped being too sensitive once I stopped tolerating insults. I used to think it was normal for guys to just text, "Hey, what you up to?" as an invitation to hang out. My friends would get similar texts. Guys never making actual plans, just waiting for them to suggest something. Everyone called it casual or going with the flow. I realized it wasn't casual. It was low effort and disrespectful. If someone wants to see you, they'll make an actual plan. My dating life improved exponentially when I started ghosting anyone who couldn't use proper grammar or suggest a specific activity. It's basic respect, not rocket science. My first real office job, the manager constantly talked about family and passion. We had team building events mandatory on weekends and a pizza party if we hit insane quotas. Everyone was always exhausted but smiled, saying, "That's just how dedicated we are." I thought it was normal for a month until I saw an old colleague from a different industry roll their eyes. He just said, "Yeah, they call that a cult." I dated a guy who, on our second date, launched into a deeply personal, hour-long monologue about his childhood trauma and ex-girlfriend betrayals. My friends thought it was a sign of vulnerability and trust. I, on the other hand, felt like I was interviewing for the role of his unpaid therapist. Spoiler, I didn't get the job. I had a friend who, every other month, would be embroiled in some colossal drama. Evicted, broken up with, car repoed. Our whole group would drop everything, pool money, and offer emotional support. Everyone called her just unlucky or a bit scattered. I started noticing a pattern where she was always the common denominator. We weren't friends, We were her emergency services. My aunt, bless her heart, would always greet me with a critical comment disguised as concern. "You look tired," or "Are you sure you want to wear that?" Family members would shush me if I pushed back, saying, "Oh, she just cares." Yeah, she cared enough to make me self-conscious before I even got a chance to say hello. I had a partner who, no matter what went wrong, would flip the blame onto me or the situation. If he was late, I should have given clear directions. If he forgot something, I should have reminded him. Our friend said, "He's just particular, and you're so understanding." I realized understanding just meant I took all the emotional blows. My cousin's parents always bragged about how their kids were too advanced for regular school and kept pulling them out for homeschooling, which usually meant long trips to various educational cults. Relatives would gush about their unique parenting. I always thought it was weird how the kids looked perpetually terrified and socially stunted. The education always seemed to be more about control than enrichment. I had a friend who, whenever I bought anything new, would immediately say, "Oh, you don't need that. Give it to me," or "Wow, you have money for that, but not to help me out." Everyone around us found it charming or just her way of joking. I found it exhausting and invasive. It wasn't a joke. It was a demand wrapped in passive aggression, designed to make me feel guilty for having my own resources. I was part of a friend group led by a guy who constantly teased everyone, often singling out one person for a string of cutting jokes disguised as affection. If you ever got upset, you were too sensitive. The others laughed along, calling him just brutally honest. I just remember the quiet relief when it wasn't my turn to be the punchline and the growing dread when it was. It wasn't teasing, it was social terrorism. My first corporate job had this mandatory fun policy. Every Friday, instead of going home, we'd have forced team-building exercises or go out for drinks with the boss on our own dime. Everyone grumbled, but went along, calling it just part of the culture. I saw it as unpaid overtime and a massive violation of personal time. The pressure to conform was immense, and refusing meant you were not a team player. It was exhausting and totally killed morale, disguised as camaraderie. I dated a guy who openly admitted he had never apologized for anything in his life. Not once. If an argument happened, he'd just let it blow over, expecting me to be the one to get over it. His family thought it was just him being strong-willed. I saw a complete inability to take accountability or empathize. There's a huge difference between not being a doormat and never, ever admitting fault. It was a massive brick wall in every disagreement. My college roommate always had these dramatic crises, losing their phone, missing a deadline, getting into an argument, but every single time, it was someone else's fault. Everyone in our friend group just rallied around them, comforting them and validating their victim narrative. I saw a consistent pattern of zero personal responsibility and constant deflection. It was draining being around someone who could never acknowledge their own role in their problems, yet always demanded sympathy. I worked for a small business where the owner constantly bragged about being like family. What that really meant was he'd demand unpaid work on weekends, ask deeply personal questions, and guilt trip you for calling in sick. Other employees saw it as him being caring and invested. I saw a boss blurring professional boundaries to manipulate loyalty and extract free labor. It felt less like family and more like a cult where your personal life was everyone's business. My best friend's parents were constantly joking about her weight, her dating life, her career choices, even in front of me. She'd laugh it off, saying, "Oh, that's just mom and dad being mom and dad." The rest of their family saw it as playful teasing. I witnessed constant low-level emotional abuse and criticism disguised as humor. It was incredibly painful to watch her internalize those barbs, trying to act like it didn't bother her. I had a neighbor who would constantly tell me about all her financial problems, medical issues, and marital woes, even though we were barely acquaintances. She'd treat me like a free therapist on the street. Everyone else on the block just said, "Oh, that's just Carol. She's an open book." I saw someone with zero concept of appropriate boundaries, using others as an emotional dumping ground without checking if it was welcome or reciprocated. It was truly exhausting to avoid her. My partner's family would constantly make harmless, sarcastic remarks and put downs to each other. If someone expressed hurt, they'd be told, "Can't you take a joke?" or "You're too sensitive." They all thought it was just their family dynamic. I saw a deeply ingrained pattern of passive aggression and emotional invalidation, where genuine feelings were punished. It created an environment where everyone walked on eggshells, pretending to be fine while simmering with resentment. It wasn't funny, it was hostile. I had a friend who always had a hot take on everything, often contrarian just for the sake of it. If you liked a movie, they'd find every flaw. If you were excited about something, they'd point out the downsides. Everyone called them the realist or the devil's advocate. I realized they just had a compulsive need to feel smarter or superior by tearing things down. It wasn't about insight. It was about deflating joy. It was utterly draining. My friend's mom still packed his lunch for work, even at 35. Attending their family dinners was an experience. Without fail, his mother would cut his meat for him, sometimes even feeding him a piece. Everyone would just chuckle and say, "Oh, that's just how she is with her baby boy." The worst was when she'd remind him to go to bed before 10 p.m. He was a successful lawyer. It wasn't cute. It was suffocating control disguised as love, and nobody else saw it. Had a colleague who was an expert on everything. Ask her about a niche software. She'd give detailed, confident, often incorrect instructions. We quickly learned to double-check. Management adored her can-do attitude, always praising her quick answers. I watched her confidently advise a new hire to delete a crucial shared folder because it looked redundant. When it broke everything, she just shrugged while you deleted it. Nobody questioned her bad advice. Knew a guy who quantified everything. If you paid for his coffee, he'd insist on paying for your next exact coffee to avoid being in debt. If you praised his car, he'd tell you its precise market value and running costs. What really got me was when I mentioned a charity run I was doing. He immediately asked if I got a free t-shirt and how much entry cost, then meticulously calculated how much profit the charity made per runner. Everyone just called him frugal. I called him exhausting. Dated a guy whose friends constantly teased his girlfriend about her weight. Every dinner, a comment, "Are you sure you want that bread, Sarah?" Or, "Did you make it to the gym today?" It wasn't just his friends. He joined in. Sarah would always force a laugh. Everyone else thought it was just banter, but I saw her shrink a little more with each joke. They called him supportive for encouraging her fitness. I saw him actively undermining her self-esteem, piece by piece. My first manager at a startup was obsessed with grind culture. He'd proudly brag about sleeping 4 hours a night and working every weekend. If you dared leave at 5 p.m., he'd joke, "Part-timer or big plans tonight?" Other colleagues started emulating him, staying late, skipping lunch. They praised him as a dedicated leader. I called him out in private for fostering an unsustainable environment. He just laughed. That's how you get ahead. The burnout rate was astronomical, but everyone praised his work ethic. I had a friend who was incredibly good at misinterpreting things. Ask him to bring a specific brand of chips to a party. He'd bring something vaguely similar, claiming he thought you said the other. Ask him to meet at 7 p.m. He'd show up at 8, swearing you said around 8. It wasn't malicious, just a consistent, convenient incompetence. Everyone called him scatterbrained or a bit forgetful, but always served to benefit him or shirk responsibility. He got a pass for being unreliable endlessly.